guys hear me?
Yeah,
Test. Awesome. Okay, sounds good. Let's welcome our panelists on stage, so we can actually let them intro themselves. Mirko from Zircuit and Bogan from Tenderly. Thanks so much. Round of applause here.
1, 2.
So, how many developers we have in the room? Raise your hand.
1.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, let's do a quick round of intro. Bogdan, you want to start?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Bogdan. I'm the token white guy of this conference for a bunch of these panels, I think. I'm one of the co-founders and CTO at Tenderly. Tenderly, for those that don't know, is a full-stack infrastructure platform spanning like 4 different product suites. I'm not here to shill Tenderly. I'm here to talk technical details. So at some points, I might talk about how Tenderly looks at these things, but that's me. That's enough shilling of Tenderly itself.
Hey, I'm Mirko. I work for Zircuit. We're at Zircuit Lab. We heavily focus on DeFi, and we also done actually a lot of work around Tectra and account abstraction and so on. Yeah.
Nice. What's up, everyone? I'm Francesco. I'm leading developer relation at Consensys, the umbrella company around MetaMask, Infura, Linea, and yeah, super excited. So this is all about kind of post-Spectra. Let's kind of give a context to everyone. So what happens around kind of developer experience pre-Spectra and post-Spectra?
Okay, so maybe a question for the audience so we get some engagement. Who here logged into a Web3 app via Gmail or GitHub or whatever? So a few of you. Okay. So that was done. You probably went through Privy because they feel like they're the market leader for this, but that was 4337. So that was a way to deploy a smart contract on chain that behaves as if it's your account. There was a few problems with this. One of the problems is that every time you log in, you basically create a new account, so you're fragmenting your own liquidity, and it's very hard to keep track of the keys. There is ways to tackle this, but basically that was what happened. Now, in the post-Spectra world, to answer your question concretely, what is changing is we can talk about a bit later about the auth call and what didn't happen, but here Ethereum added a new transaction type, which basically gives you superpowers, or another way that I like to say it is, it stole the idea from Meta in Libra, actually. So the idea is that you can turn your EOA, so your normal account, into a smart contract for the sake of that one particular transaction, and that's it. And this is basically gave developers a way to run code as if they were you, without actually having you deploy a smart contract that is impersonating your wallet.
Yeah. I guess I give a bit more kind of background context. Yeah. So there was another EIP 3074 that it was around for a while, and there was a lot of drama, I guess, in the community. Should we use 3074? Should we just go fully for 3027? And that's why one day Vitalik, out of nowhere, I guess in 20 minutes, he probably brought the 7702 spec. And then we decided that, okay, 7702 is the way to go. And the cool thing about it is that it's kind of a hybrid because you can still fully integrate it into 4337. So you can have kind of the best of both worlds when using EOA wallets.
Yeah, think about the developer experience today. What are kind of the main pain points that you think developer has while building their first dApp? For example, yesterday we announced the Web3 auth acquisition, so embedded wallet is obviously a big kind of direction. I think onboarding users is one big thing, but also managing the developer expectation is also one important thing. We're going obviously in the direction on the CLI side. What do you think are kind of the pain points today around developers, developer onboarding, but also developer tooling?
I think it's completely different how people think about authorization and authentication in this space compared to Web 2. I think that's the main limitation, because the usual thing that Web 2 developers go through is something called OAuth. So this is the login with Gmail or whatever. And there you get a particular token that you use for the rest of the session, and you don't necessarily think about these things. So you only do it once. The screwed up part about Web 3 is that anytime you want to actually do anything, I like to say that you go again through the whole flow, because you need to ask for access, you need to ask for authorization, and all of this stuff. So I think part of it is the mental burden of changing how you think about these things. So I think that's the piece for onboarding developers. And then also in general, when you're a dApp developer, it's overly weird also, and I think you see this more than we do, what's the job of the wallet versus what's the job of the dApp, because it's weird. everybody expects the wallet to protect them and give them capabilities, but it's also the dApps wanting to have those capabilities. So I think right now what is inevitably happening is at first we're going to have curation, similar to what you guys are doing with 7.7.10, if I'm correct, which we can talk about later as well. By the way, we're going to use a lot of numbers that mean fuck nothing outside of this room, but I think it's going to be fun to talk about. And then I think we're going to start at first with a lot of curation and actually in a very constrained system to what it can actually be. And then in the next 6 to 12 months, we're actually going to see what developers build with this and which developer experience actually pops out of this right now.
I guess also kind of the tech, how to grow the UX. Since you work at MetaMask, when MetaMask was started, obviously it was a wallet for a single chain. Back in 2016, it was about only focused on mainnet, and so were most dApps, so all dApps at the beginning. But then we started to have like 1 gazillion L2s. We started to integrate it on EVM chain. And from the UX side, for both especially wallet, but also dApp developers, it has been like very complex to kind of to keep up to date, because now we have to think about bridging, and we have to think about paying gas in different chain. We have to think about gas. We don't want to pay gas in a native token, but we want to use a different token. So I guess that was one of the main pain points. It was all the complexity that has come since 2020 until today.
Yeah, I think like stuff like also like chain abstraction, it's also like playing a big role. But I mean, going back a little bit on the 7702 stuff, like, so what actually happened? Because somehow I was happy that we kind of like shipped this part post Spectra, but somehow also like I tried to stay realistic about. I started to see obviously the batch transaction, batch revokes. That I thought, okay, that's actually super cool that a developer can revoke hundreds accesses to the apps in one time. And then I thought about a more realistically view. I was like, oh, but in Web 2, you know, when you start doing batch transact and you kind of like signing multiple transactions, it kind of like was a minimal expectation from the users, right? I think we are getting there. But what else can you actually do around this kind of like post 7702 with on the developer side, also on the user side, right? I think you can enable a lot of different new features, but maybe you can deep dive a little bit on what's happening after.
Sure. So all of this technically isn't a new idea. I think why this is innovative, it's because it's much easier to do. I mean, that's the main thing. You had similar stuff that you could do with intent, by the way, very similar to signing an intent and then it would do something. It was a bad user experience, but you could still do it. The case that you mentioned, which every article mentions here, because I guess that's what ChatGPT coughs up for the person writing the blog, is the approve and swap. So right now, if you go to Uniswap, for example, you know that you will need to approve your tokens pre-factor. You would need to approve your tokens. That's one transaction, and then you would swap the tokens, and that can either be an intent, so something called permit to, or it can be an actual swap happening on chain. So that was at least 2 transactions that need to happen. With EIP 7702, what this basically allows to is, for the sake of this particular transaction or this particular interaction, maybe is a better way to put it, what Uniswap can do is turn your EOA, so turn your wallet into a smart contract only for that particular transaction, and basically do the approve and the swap in Solidity or whichever other language they want, but in Solidity do the approval and a swap. And as a user, this basically means it was a single transaction. More concrete example: has anybody ever signed here anything over DocuSign? Okay, so this is very similar to, imagine that you have, for example, I'm the signatory for Tenderly, which I really hate, but that's the fact of life. So I have like a couple of things that I need to sign every day, sometimes a lot of them every day or every week. This would basically mean that if I didn't want to read the contracts, and we're going to talk about security, I think the DocuSign analogy will actually go a long mile during this panel. Imagine that I can go select all of the service agreements and contracts that they need to sign, click one sign, and all of those actual contracts, like real physical contracts, are executed or signed by me. So this is what 7702. Does this analogy make sense? If it's bad, sorry, I'm a bit sleep deprived. I really try hard to make this one work. That's one piece. But then also what's possible in Web3, paying in different tokens, so not paying gas in ETH, but actually paying in something else. So it allows for that. I think that we will see stuff like scripting, which is a case that I didn't see mentioned. This was actually something that we did as a hackathon project at ETH Berlin 2. It was called Sol.tty, but what we can have as a developer experience, you guys know how you have like a REPL, like a read-evaluate print loop, where in Python you can write something and you can execute line by line. You will be able to have, if somebody wants to do it, a similar experience now for Solidity. So you could actually write a piece of Solidity, send it on-chain, and it could be executed as part of your EOA. Nobody talks about these things. It's questionable if you would like to do that, but I want just to explain like the flexibility of stuff that can actually happen for these things. Do you have any more user-facing
social
examples?
recovery, it's one
Social recovery,
yeah. It's a big one, especially right now with EOA. EOA has served us great, but like there is a few kind of caveats around the EOAs. One of them is obviously like if you lose your key, you pretty much lost access to your wallet. And if you think about, I don't know, even if you compare it to traditional banking, if you lose your credit card, you still have access to your bank account, right? And I guess that's what 43377702 kind of wanted to get closer to, like even though you can still lose your key, but you still have a way to access your funds, you still have a way to sign transactions and so on.
Yes. Yes, so social recovery I think is a big one. I actually recently started to see like some hacking happening. I don't know. You touched on security. I think like we should kind of like explain a little bit what's happening in the space. That people were saying, okay, people got hacked because of kind of like some delegation of accounts. Where do you think are kind of like those are there some security issues? Because I kind of like trying to follow a little bit, but I also didn't understand what level of kind of like breach would happen. If it was on the human level, on the delegation layer, or even on the dApps developer layer. I think this is just getting bigger. More we abstract, also more we opening entry points.
I think so. The largest delegation or the largest hack of this type is the Bybit one. I mean, it was done through the Safe UI being hijacked, but what they did is they changed the implementation of a safe. So a safe is a smart contract. In this case, how that could happen, imagine that instead of a multi-sig, they had a normal wallet. They would just change into which smart contract this wallet turned into, or like which smart contract's capabilities the wallet assumed at the time. My prediction, whatever the fuck does that mean, but my thoughts on what is actually going to happen is that we're initially going to see two broad categories of hacks that are going to happen. One is people just blindly signing delegations and people draining funds from them, to be completely honest. I think what MetaMask is doing, and I'm not shilling just because we're on the same stage of not allowing you to delegate to anything unless it went through like a rigorous process, is a good thing. Because if you let people to delegate their access to their account to anything, they will lose their funds. I think that's like one broad, which for a very long time will cause issues, unfortunately. The second one is probably certain, similar to how flash loans came out. Like nobody thought about what can happen. And I think that whole second category of problem is going to be my dApp was written to work with EOAs and 4337 wallets. And I really want to adopt this thing, and then somebody's going to figure out some weird way to do reentrancy or something else and do those types of attack. And then, I mean, from the second category, what we're going to have is standardization pop up. Unfortunately, we're one of the space that spends most money on standardization because we need a $600 million hack for someone to write an ERC. And then from the first category, and that was a joke, but unfortunately it happens. And then for the first category of things that's probably going to happen is you're going to have providers like us or Blockade or Cybers or whoever do scanners that are then embedded in wallets like MetaMask, Zerion, Ledgers of the world, or whichever, and try to protect users in that way. So I think those are like the security implications in the short term that's going to happen.
How granular can the delegation model be?
Yeah, so this kind of touches upon 7.7.10, I think, as well. Are we talking about session keys now? Or no. Yeah, just looking at that to say, who knows what the session key is? Yeah. Cool. Who knows what the cookie is on a Web2 page? I'm guessing more people. Okay. So other than the overly frustrating pop-up that happens on everyone's screen, cookies is a way as you log into a website, you get a cookie, and then you can do stuff until that cookie expires. So similar to that, we can look at session keys as well for 7702. How does this analogy go? Is basically I can delegate my EOA, my wallet, to a certain smart account, but I can basically think about three things. I can say what, so which functions can be called. I can say when, which is basically, is it in a certain context, as in 3 times a day, or until next Sunday, or like those types of things. And then finally, it is who can actually do this on my behalf. An example of social recovery can be only these particular people can recover my funds if I didn't have any activity in the past 3 months. And they can only send funds to another EOA, and that's it. So those would be like the what, when, and who for those types of things. And then basically session keys give us a capability to have granular permissions for these cases. I hope that was straightforward.
No, it was super interesting on the action keys. Question on the infra side. I mean, going a little bit lower, right? Like obviously, like people at this point know what bundles are, what is an RPC. How this kind of like infra is moving forward to kind of like this post-Pectra era. Even like the on-demand pool, entry points. Like I think there is a lot of interesting discussion here.
I'm not Flashbot, so I cannot answer to the temple stuff. The straightforward stuff is there's a new RPC called Get Wallet Capabilities, if I'm correct. I have so much useless information in my brain. Sorry, so it's called Get Wallet Capabilities, and the point here is for a DApp to figure out what the RPC can actually provide in these cases. So that's one thing. I think all of the AA providers, the Alchemies, Pimlicos, Dynamics of the world, also will need to ship stuff, either different entry points, kernels, or however they call them, to support these delegation patterns. So there's a bunch of that needs to be built out, and at least to my knowledge, that is mostly not actually built out yet. It's only just a few things built out, and then I think simulation providers like us, like right now, we will simulate and return you results that are useful for a 7702 transaction, but I also think we can do much more useful things with the things that are happening there, both from a security scanning perspective, but also then from like a developer tooling perspective for you to reason about which delegation happened to whom, how did the state change, and all of these things.
Do you think bundlers are kind of not as important?
No, I think they will. So this is the AAPs that they mentioned. I think paymasters will somewhat as well evolve. I think, yes. Although, but I'm not an AA provider, so I know the surface level 2 blog posts deep implications for it.
Makes sense. Yeah. I mean, around tooling, you touched on developer tooling. What about like on the security tooling side? Do you feel like this need to evolve? Or what are kind of like the gaps that we need to kind of like cover? Yeah,
I think, the most straightforward scanners will be prevent the user for being the first one to delegate to a particular smart contract. That can be one. So I think it's much easier now when you're interacting with these. I don't envision a world where we have hundreds of thousands of these smart contracts that we delegate to. Like most of the usage is going to be like Uniswap's a proven swap. It's going to be a thing on Polymarket, whatever they call it. Like it's going to be only a few. So I think it would be fairly easy to detect and tell people, are you actually sure that you want to be the first one to delegate to these? At least that are my thoughts. But what are yours? I think you see this as well a lot.
Yeah. No. Yeah, we're seeing different things. I was wondering more around, how also like Tenderly is moving forward, because you guys support fast iteration with like loggings and stuff.
Okay. So I wasn't maybe straightforward with the answer. So for us, I think the most apparent two pieces are first the security aspect. So recently we shipped, if you have a Ledger device with a touch screen, now when you're signing a transaction, we are actually one of the providers that will scan that transaction. You can get like a security report for us that where you can see what will happen, like will you get rugged, will you not get rugged. I think a bunch of work in that direction is what's going to happen. And then the second one is inevitably something we call virtual testnets, which is like a testing product, and this is the shilling part, sorry. But it's, I think, honestly, the best way to test dApps and to test wallets connecting to a network. There, I think, helping people reason about what these delegations do and like in which state the EOAs can actually end up in. What are the contract interactions? Because it's weird. It's an EOA that's behaving like a smart contract that might be interacting with something that's a proxy. They can be like very hard to reason about. So I think most of our work would be helping developers not screw up during development, and then helping wallets in the last mile delivery problem of preventing users of like shooting themselves in the foot.
I think that it's also, I guess, very important, the standardization part of it, because now everyone is kind of rushing to 7702, especially wallets.
I think everybody's trying to ship stuff. This is why I like the MetaMask thing of like opening the floodgates slowly versus YOLO, do whatever the fuck you want. So I think, sorry, you're getting my full personality, I swear. To me. But yeah, anyway, the whole point there is, during this rush, people are inevitably going to get rugged. But what are your plans maybe at Zircuit? I think that can also be an interesting one.
Zircuit is interesting because we have
cover the security of Zircuit. I'm a huge fan.
This huge security model, and we have this kind of machine learning already implemented that it can detect hacks and kind of stop malicious transaction. So what we could do is that, let's say, I don't know, an example, if you are on a Uniswap LP and there is like a kind of very weird event where you're kind of draining most of your liquidity, we could kind of quarantine the transaction until then there is a kind of consensus mechanism around, okay, this transaction was malicious or no. And I guess that's very cool with the delegation part as well, because we
think, and it's happening on the sequencer. This is the thing that they really like about...
it's a sequencer level security, we call it. So I guess it's very different from what other L2 do, which like most L2 kind of focus on scalability. And it's like for us it was like we are a very technical team and we are a very security focused team. So it's that's why
it did come out to QuantStem, so it also makes sense.
We don't say that loud, but
Okay, but technically, I think what is super cool is, okay, if we have wallets as the last mile delivery, the user still clicks yes. Sometimes.
Of course,
Maybe too many times. The users still click yes, even if you tell them you shouldn't do this, really, please stop, you're losing your whole life savings. You will want to off yourself if you click yes, they still click yes. I think this idea of quarantine, of like the sequencer protecting you as well as like a guardian angel, is a very interesting approach to this. And I think it's also a very good way, as like everyone's rushing, you guys can on a network level enforce the slowness is a feature.
I guess the downside is kind of the censorship level, right? That you could argue that it's a bit of censorship added, but also it's like by using an L2, I guess there is always a kind of centralization part, no matter what L2 you're using, right?
I think it's that. I also think I have the unpopular opinion that Sony didn't screw up anything with censoring on Sonium. What I mean by this is it's their own chain. They can do whatever they want. The true decentralization is that you can choose not to transact on Sony. That's the decentralization piece. If someone wants if someone is okay for Zircuit to incorrectly protect them, which could be interpreted as censorship, they can go transact somewhere else. If I'm managing hundreds of millions of dollars and I want that safety, but I also want access to DeFi markets, then I'm going to transact on Zircuit. I think it's very straightforward. Decentralization is a choice. It's the choice itself, not decentralization on each network.
I mean, it's the same with MetaMask and the RPC Infura, right? You can choose to point your RPC
to another one.
That makes sense.
What is Linea doing?
Linea is doing different things. You will see a bunch of announcements coming in the next couple of weeks.
Cool.
Are you in Berlin? You're coming to Berlin or ECC?
ECC, yes.
Nice. Yeah, that would be fun. Yeah, and there are different kind of like levels. Actually, like a couple of announcements coming on the prover side, but that would be interesting to see. But in Berlin, we will speak more about that. So let's move a little bit more higher level. So actually, what is happening now? We shipped kind of like the post-Spectra era. What is kind of like could be research around EF also, like what you guys are thinking? What is happening next? Like, is there any EIPs that we should kind of like focus about, or like more high level, right? What are the next kind of like big milestones that we should ship? I'm just hearing like Vitaly a couple of days ago mentioning like, what was that, 10x in the next year, in terms of like kind of like TPS side and proving also transactions. I was like, okay, that's interesting. But practically speaking, what are the next kind of like milestones that you think like they need to be accomplished?
So the interesting thing is, for me, Spectra felt and the team that's doing VM stuff in our company is gonna kill me after this, but it feels like it crept up. What do I mean by crept up? Is that the final stuff that's gonna end up in Pectra kinda made it in last minute. I don't know if you guys had a similar feeling, but it is the largest upgrade ever that happened to the Ethereum ecosystem, because you had the blob stuff that was shipped, you had this, so type 4 transactions that were shipped. You also had on the Consensys the staking thing, where now people can, because before you would need to stake exactly 32 ETH per staking node, now you can actually stake multiples of that through a single node, which is a very weird balance to get, like for centralization and some other stuff. But it was the largest upgrade with most moving pieces that happened to Ethereum, I think, ever. I might be wrong. At least in the last 7 years that we've been in the space, it feels the largest. So for Fusaka, if it's the next one, if I remember correctly, I think it's more throughput-related stuff, if I recall correctly. I can't remember the roadmap by heart. It was that, but I also think it's more interesting what people are going to do now with Pectra, because if it is the largest one, let's see how it pans out. And I am evading the question because I can't remember the roadmap fully by heart. But the long-term one, I can maybe speak to that. The idea is to maybe switch Ethereum to RISC-V virtual machine, which is also interesting. Like all of the stuff that we're shipping right now is in the context of the EVM. So how will these transactions behave on the RISC-V? I think that's a bunch of stuff that people writing about this on Twitter are not actually thinking about, but just like farming for likes. And then also, other than that, it's like a huge amount of blob space in like the 10x in throughput. So we're going to see if people are actually going to move back from L2s to an L1, which I don't think will happen, but that's one side effect that can happen as well. So I don't know if that's right.
At this point, I'm kind of excited about the new ecosystem players that are coming. Obviously, our good friends at MegaETH. It's a very interesting one. I think instant finality will be like a huge kind of part of the future. And also the chain like Monad, and there is like a very few interesting projects that are coming up. And for me, it's like, I'm really interested to see like how they will coexist with mainnet, and how like the entire ecosystem is going to shape in general.
Yeah, I mean, we are also like siloing ourselves, right? I mean, back in Dubai with the base camp of Sui, like people will say, oh, I just need like to be in this ecosystem and building on top of that. I'm just afraid that we're getting a lot around kind of like siloing each other, because of course, like, chain abstraction is hard. You see efforts by LeFi or LiFi, Wormhole, everybody's kind of bringing things together. But I think on the user perspective, you don't want to kind of interact on different kind of ecosystem. I was impressed. I definitely opened my mind a lot 2 weeks ago in Solana Accelerate when I announced the SVM changes, reflecting completely Turbine, and they did that. The efforts will be taking place around 6 to 8 months process. I was like, whoa, how long it takes, like kind of like the merge to actually be accessed and got kind of like community feedback, right? Do you feel like the speed of change is quick enough in the Ethereum ecosystem right now? Will users be expecting and will be happy with this kind of like change speed? Or you think like we will start to kind of like get more siloed community until maybe we will start to build really chain abstraction and better kind of like usability around the ecosystem?
I'm going to say the same thing I said last week in Prague. I think the slowness is a feature, not a bug. I like the slowness. I'm sorry if anybody, Kartik was there, so he will know. I'm sorry for saying the same thing again. But it's very rare for a system to work for 10 years without any downtime. I think we should keep that. I honestly don't think TPS is what's keeping retail from coming to us. People say, remember when the NFT craze was huge on Ethereum, or I don't know, when things were happening in Ethereum, and like the gas prices were so high, and like retail didn't come. And like the gas prices were high because retail came. I mean, they didn't spike just for shits and giggles. It's like what happened because of demand. And I think inevitably, if retail comes, no matter how much you scale the chain, we will use up that bandwidth in some way, shape, or form. I think honestly that long-term, I am aligned with the long-term Ethereum roadmap of the base Ethereum stopping to be almost fully for any application and just becoming like a base layer for Rollups. I think it's interesting that Polkadot did something similar years ago, but unpopular opinion of mine. But anyway, when we look at it that way, I think rollups are inevitable. I think rollups are the place to experiment, and that we should keep Ethereum stable. That's the main thing. And then use rollups for interesting experiments like Zircuit, or interesting experiments like, I don't know, Stylus from Arbitrum Orbit, or from Arbitrum and all of the others. So yeah, that's at least my opinion.
To also agree that the roll-up are inevitable, even though I kind of see there's going to be a big cleanup, because at the moment we have like $100 layer 2s, which probably most of them have 0 users or close to 0. So I think in the next few years we kind of will see a consolidation in the L2 space, where like the top maybe 10, 20 projects again here to stay, and most of the other projects that will either pivot or they will disappear completely.
And I think that's true for, yeah, sorry, finish. Sorry.
No, I was going to say it's similar to what happened with the wallet space in 2017, that everyone was kind of launching a wallet, and then we just have now those kind of big players and a few smaller ones that are still around.
I agree. The thing when I wanted to jump in, I think it's true for ecosystem chains. I think it's unrealistic that we will live in a world where we have hundreds of ecosystem chains. For the roll-up future, I think app chains are going to be a thing. The example I give is I really don't need to share the same bandwidth. Like me buying an NFT ticket to ETH Belgrade doesn't need to share the same bandwidth and same database as BlackRock doing high-frequency trading or whatever they do. I don't know, buy weapons. But basically, I don't think that we have to transact in the same space. So this is why I think app chains are inevitable. Like my Starbucks loyalty points, why should they be on Ethereum mainnet or Monitor? But no, it's true. Like it really doesn't matter. Like
seriously, it's gonna be very customized kind of future where.
Yeah. I hope Tenderly kind of depends on it. But joking aside, never in the history of anything ever has it worked that we cram everything into one place in any industry. Mm-hmm. I know this sounds like an ambiguous thing, but if you look at, we have multiple cloud providers, and then everybody's spinning up their own servers. So that can be an analogy for like L1, L2, or like L2, L3. Any piece of tech ever has developed like this. I think it's foolish to think that we're going to do it otherwise, like any other way.
Yeah, we already saw it a lot, right? Also, people want personalized experience, right? You see that like people always assuming Web3, maybe people will not do like SSO or social logins, but then embedded wallet, boom, they're kind of like booming right now, right? And I mean, it's just different journeys with different needs. We saw that a lot with snaps, right? That people started to have, security heavy folks were actually testing out all the security snaps, Tenderly included, right? And then you also saw like, DeFi heavy users want to actually have more snaps specific to that. So I think like customized experience is something that we need to kind of like satisfy, and that's probably the reason also why we're here. We're having more fragmentation because everybody's kind of like focusing, trying to find different kind of like value prop for their technology, right?
Yeah.
But we still need to solve like stuff around around layer 2 fragmentation, stuff around siloing ourselves between different node EVM and EVM ecosystem, because at the end everybody will be seen as part of like one big package and people coming. And I saw that, I opened really my eyes around the AI agents building, and people were saying, we, like ourselves, our frameworks, Eliza was amazing, right? So people were starting MVP AI agents, and then actually like Web2 folks coming, building with Eliza, they were actually like, after the MVP was done, they were actually going back from scratch and building that from scratch, basically. And I was like, why you're doing that? Hey, because I didn't get enough flexibility. So many kind of like, we are also like somehow also living in our own kind of like ecosystem chamber a little bit, and somehow also like stubborn to how we want to welcome more Web2 developers in the space and user out there.
But I think everyone is realizing that also the future is inevitably, it's also cross-chain and also outside EVM. Even MetaMask, I mean, you guys were very reluctant for like 7-8 years to integrate an EVM chain, and look what happened last week with the Solana integration, right?
Yes, more to come, yeah. The BTC side, there is a lot of like different things coming. But how you will solve like, for example, layer 2 fragmentation?
But again, I think it will solve itself by companies running out of VC money. And so that's one piece. No, I mean, that's one piece.
Yeah.
The second piece is chain abstraction will happen in some way, shape, or form. So for those that don't know, chain abstraction is the idea that you don't particularly care on which chain you have funds. It will just magically move around. It's interesting that chain abstraction is moving slow enough that we have specific companies solving it for themselves, like Tether with USDT 0, where the idea is you can spend Tether or on any chain without needing to think about bridging or anything. You just spend it wherever, but it's like a Tether specific or USDT specific thing. And then, yeah, so chain abstraction, and then finally, I think interoperability stuff. We're going to see how the optimism interop stuff happens this year. I think that will be an interesting experiment to see. We have the Cosmos ecosystem where IBC, I think, solved this already, to be completely honest. We might, as Ethereum, adopt something similar there. And yeah, I think it will be solved. I honestly think that a bunch of these things is an Ethereum EVM ecosystem, or however you want to call it. We're trying to solve some problems like 6 steps ahead. At least my brain doesn't vibe with, we need quantum compute safe snarks.
Oh yeah, of course.
But like nobody's doing anything other than DeFi. Like I don't know, but there's I hope enough of us in the space to work on all of these different issues.
Yeah. I was recently, I was in Prague, like in this panel with DC Builder, and starting to speak about like from planks to snarks, and referring like so many different type of like ZK privacies. And I was like, yeah, that's interesting, but do actually like dApps developer need to know about all this world right now? Like just refer me like which type of use case do I need to implement, which kind of like proofs?
Yeah.
I think that's, for example, like one low-hanging fruit, right? And it was very interesting because, for example, on other ecosystem, people are very aware that dApps developer are the main audience you want to attract in the developer and builder space. And when you're speaking about protocol developer awareness, it's on the other side. Yes, we can have this discussion, but this need to be on a closed group, right? Yeah. And I think that's one kind of like main challenge sometimes that I have is that 90% of the discussion are on the protocol level. Instead, actually, how do you spin up dApps? What kind of like CLIs do we want to actually discuss? So at the end, we're always going back to the DevX side. So that's an interesting discussion.
Also the problem is like I think on the developer side is like it has been historically really hard to monetize developer tooling, right? See what happened with things like Impura or there is Truffle. Like there's been many cases where like we had this amazing project that served the community so well, but it was really hard to monetize them.
Yeah, I mean, but developer tooling is also like a life cycle, right? I think at the end you're starting to build a tool that could be actually like for mostly awareness for the builder out there, and if you want to commercialize it, you have always to find ways, right? And you see that also with Linea. There were 120 people R&D team in Consensys for like 4 or 5 years, and was supposed to be like almost like could be even like a sunk cost kind of like department, but at the end you see like what R&D can spin off. You just need to have the initiative to actually saying, okay, let's commercialize some product after that. But it's a business decision, right? I never thought that Ganache was supposed to be monetized. Like there was testing frameworks. You see that, right?
But Truffle Teams was a good idea. We were scared shitless as Andreoli when Truffle Teams came. No, I'm not joking. We just released Forks. Our brand wasn't known. And Truffle Teams came out, which I'm not stating that it was a copy. I just think it was like similar idea at a similar time. And it couldn't be copied because it was like 2 weeks difference or 3. It was something. We're like, fuck, everybody knows what Truffle is. Like, we lost. But it's over. No. We were, because it was similar. It was like the Truffle Teams and Truffle Sandbox, the Ganache Sandbox or whatever the name was of the thing, was very early similar to what we wanted to do with Forks, but we didn't have the distribution and everything else. And it's like different ways to do company level stuff, and I agree. Like developer tooling is very hard to monetize. I also think like for the account abstraction stuff, we will see if these also bundlers and everyone else are a viable business model. When you look at Dune dashboards, you see a lot of them are not generating actually that much revenue. So it is interesting monetizing developer tooling as a topic. I mean, this is my day-to-day work at Andreoli. It is hard. It is doable, but you need to go in this space as a company or as a team or as a foundation or whichever special little snowflake name you like for a group of people. You need to go horizontal much sooner than maybe in other industries, because it's, as a space, we progress extremely fast to a very huge level of depth, and then we stop, which is not normal for any industry. And then you need to figure out each time, like, okay, what's the next horizontal thing that's happening? And we need to keep pace there, and then this is enough, and then let's do the next thing, and then keep pace, and then that's enough. 100%. So yeah, that's definitely hard to pull out correctly.
How do you guys prioritize on the developer tooling side on what to build next? Is it like a business decision in terms of revenue? Or?
Serving developers is a very interesting thing. Although I guess the devil is also, kind of, but developers are very loud and they yell at you. So I think it's just listening to what people ask for, and then the main job of us as Andreoli is not coming up with new ideas. Our main job is listening to what people want, and then like people say 7 different symptoms, and you figure out what's the actual cause of that symptom, and that's what we ship as a product. Like I can probably all of the products that we ship, not by being asked to ship them, but us thinking of them, we needed to sunset. And all of the products where we actually listen to people yelling at us, but not like really yelling, are the ones that are successful. Like virtual testnets is a good example. Transaction intelligence, the security scanning piece, is literally just everybody coming to us and like, you're doing simulations, why don't you do scanning? Like it's not us waking up and saying, we should scan these. It's like people yelling at us, why don't you scan these? So I think that's the correct way to...
Yeah, at the end it's all about kind of like community feedbacks, right?
Yeah.
And I think I really like what you say about distribution, because I think like somehow also like we're building and we're thinking like, technology is what make PMFs, right? But at the end also like distribution and ecosystem building, community development, community ecosystem building is super important, right? Obviously we're servicing like a community, and we're trying to do it on a Web3 way, right? And cutting corners, taking longer, I think is also making more sense if you're actually like loyal to the values. But a lot of time, obviously, like if I'm putting myself in a Web2 kind of like user shoes, I'm saying, okay, yes, you're loyal, but at the end, I still running decentralized AI in a bunch of like siloed AWS kind of like servers. So yeah,
it is weird. It's also hard because when you're running a company, you're starting to lose the company in the community aspect. Nenad, who announced this, I actually had a lot of conversations with him around this, and one of my statements is that us as Andreoli, we cannot have a community, we can have a fan base, because to have a community, you need to have someone to either hold a part of that community. In our space, that's tokens, but Andreoli will never have a token. That's one piece, or another that they can somehow contribute. So, for example, I can quite sure be that people feel like they're part of the Foundry community. Like we literally have the Rust Summit tomorrow, where a community is going to show up, even though like Foundry is paid for by Paradigm. So even though it's like a very capitalistic entity behind it, it's still a community because people can contribute. Well, for Andreoli, you cannot hold a part of it, and you cannot contribute to it. So this means that you can only get a shirt over there and be a fan, not a community member. And I think that's a hard thing in space, like playing this line fully. And yeah,
it's a BD work rather than community.
I mean, it's BD work, yes. The way that I say it, we're more like Taylor Swift, less like less like a church, but yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah. We don't really have much time, but also want to recommend to check the Orbit circle, right, about community building. It's really interesting to see like intrinsic and extrinsic kind of like incentives, and right, trying to understand, because building communities is so hard, and people always underestimate the fact that product is everything, and deployment, distribution is easy, right? Especially on the who to hire professional level. Cool. Do we have a question here in the audience? I think we're at time here. I don't know if we have a mic around. There you are, yes. Here for unknown Jordan in the audience.
The OG Jordan.
Hi, back to the 7702. If you look at Solana or even Algorand or Aptos, you have ability to sign once to execute a bunch of instructions. It's like executing for an undeployed contract once, and then it disappears. Now, the Spectra is like Unix set UID forever, and it's kind of scary. Do you know why they went for that much as opposed to just doing the Aptos or Solana, sign multiple instructions that'll do it?
I think we will inevitably end up using session keys much more. So session keys give you the constraints that you mentioned. and it's also until the end of the transaction, and then you have the curation piece that MetaMask is doing. So it's not like, so some of the stuff is you need to sign an authorization list, which is basically you sign that during this transaction, I'm okay to be impersonated by one of these contracts, and you actually sign for each address of this particular contract, and it's only valid for that particular nonce. So it's not like you're signing it until the end of time. Now, if you do session keys, that's a bit different, but in the session keys themselves, you can constrain it in such a way that it's not until the end of time, but it's actually up until a certain point. Or again, the interesting example for me is like twice weekly, which wasn't possible before. But I think, I mean, what Francesco said at a certain point, I think the security implications are also going to be interesting because somebody's going to find a way to do an infinite signature or whatever. Your question specifically was why did people pick to do it that way? I don't know. I just gave you my interpretation of how it's going to tackle that particular choice. I don't know if you guys have an answer.
It looks scary for a naive user, but...
Sorry?
It looks scary for a naive user. They have to know what they're signing.
But the fact, I also would argue that you're not a normal user by the fact that you could ask this question. I think, and I mean this as a compliment, by the way. I think that you understand it from a technical level, and that's why you find it scary. I think, unfortunately, most people are not going to understand the complexity. They're going to go to the Uniswap interface, and for the first time, they're going to go, this was one transaction. It wasn't two transactions. Fun, and never think about it ever again. So, yeah.
Thanks.
Any other questions so far? We're good to go? Okay, sounds good. Thanks so much for your time. Thanks so much, panelists. Please, quick round of applause.
And a huge round of applause for our host as well.